Hello, my name is Tara. I'm a partner technical consultant focused on Dynamics GP. I'll be introducing the new features released in Dynamics GP 2015 for Workflow 2.0. Before we get started, please be aware this video is an add-on to the working knowledge of Workflow 2.0 functionality that was introduced in Microsoft Dynamics GP 2013 R2. For further information on GP 2013 R2, please take a look at the other recording. For our agenda today, we're going to take a look at the new workflows that were released in GP 2015. They are GL batch approval, payables batch approval, vendor approval, receivables batch approval, expense report approval, employee skills approval, direct deposit approval, employee profile approval, and W-4 approval. Before we jump into GP 2015 new features, I wanted to take a moment to provide a quick snapshot of some of the workflows that were released in Dynamics GP 2013 R2, which was available at the end of May 2014. This slide shows Workflow 2.0. However, there are over 120 features available since the release of Dynamics GP 2013. The General Ledger batch approval workflow requires that the batch be approved via processing through the workflow before it can be posted. The batch can be entered, transactions can be added, and the edit list can be printed, but posting of the batch will not be allowed prior to the approval. The workflow actions for the batch are available in the batch entry window and the General Ledger batch list. The workflow history can be accessed from the journal entry inquiry and the budget transaction inquiry, the batch entry, and the General Ledger batch list. Let's take a look at this feature in action. Now this is GP 2015, and we're going to click on Administration. Once Workflow Setup has been enabled under the system, we can go under the Company, and then Workflow, and then Workflow Maintenance. From here, we can click on Financial, and we'll see the General Ledger batch approval. Now use the lookup to select the manager for this workflow. In this example, I'm just going to grab my administrator, click OK, and now I can click New Workflow and create a unique workflow name. In this case, I'm just going to call it GL batch approval. And then I'm going to select some of my options. And more information on how to set this up is in the GP 2013 R2 video. I'm going to click Save, New Step, and I'm going to make a condition where my batch name or batch ID is going to contain the word test. Click Add, click OK, and then I'm going to assign it to a user. In this case, I'm going to assign it to Phyllis. Click OK, and then I'm going to have a send message, an automatically default message that comes with the system to send to Phyllis when there's an approval that needs to be done. I'm going to create a unique name, GL batch step 1. You can create a different name on here, so maybe it's just a manager's approval, or based on some condition you can change it to what name you want. Click Save. Now I'm going to go back and activate and save again. I can close this and now go under Financials, and then under Batches I can see that Workflow is enabled. So let's create a batch called Test. I'm going to do it under the General Entry, but you can also use it for the clearing and budget transactions. And click Transactions and create an example. I'm going to click Save, bring my batch back up, and now it's sitting at Not Submitted, so I can click Submit. And now when I go back, I'm going to just relaunch the window and take a look at my test batch, and I will see that it's pending approval by Phyllis. This functionality also works with the master posting and series posting windows. I'm going to close this and open up the series posting. If I try to select this batch to post, it gives me a message saying that this batch must be approved before it can be marked for posting. And then also if I look at the master posting tools, routines, master posting, under the financial series, it gives me the same message that the batch must be approved. Now let's log in as Phyllis and approve the batch. So I'm logged in as Phyllis. There are a number of different ways you can approve the batch. I can do this if I have it enabled through my email. I can approve, reject, or delegate. This is the email message that is predefined in the system that you can customize. I can do it with inside of Dynamics GP by going to Financials. Under the list, there's General Ledger Batch Pending Approval. I can select the batch, and I can approve, reject, delegate a number of different batches if there were more than one. I can also go under Financials to the Batch window, select the batch, and I can approve from this window as well. The Payables Batch Approval workflow will require that the batch be approved via processing through the workflow before it can be posted. In addition, for computer check batches, the batch must be approved before the checks can be printed. The batch can be entered, transactions can be added, and the edit list can be printed. Printing of checks, where applicable, and posting of the batch will not be allowed prior to the approval. If a user attempts to print a check batch when the batch has not yet been submitted to the workflow, a user will receive a message. The document must be submitted for approval first. If the user attempts to print a check batch when the batch has been submitted but not yet completed through the workflow processing, the user will see a message saying, "The document must complete workflow first." The workflow action for the batch are available in the Payables Batch Entry window, the Payables Batch List, and for specific tasks in the Payables Batch Pending Approval and Payables Batch Not Submitted list. The workflow history can be accessed from the Payables Transaction Inquiry Zoom and the Payables Payment Zoom windows, in addition to the windows already mentioned before. Let's take a look at this feature in action. So here I'm logged into GP 2015. I'm going to click on the administration. With workflow setup already enabled under the system, we're going to go into the company, workflow, workflow maintenance, and enable payables batch approval. I'm going to select my manager. In this case, it's administrator. I'm going to click save, click new workflow, create a unique workflow, select my options, click save, click new step, I'm going to create a condition, and I'm going to click the blue arrow. From here, there's a number of predefined options that we can select. I'm going to select batch ID, contains the word test. Also, if you needed to expand out the list, you can click on display extended field list and it will increase the options from this drop down. So I'm going to click add, OK. I'm going to assign it to my user. I'm going to select send message for the approver. Click save. And now I'm going to go back and activate the workflow. and click Save. And now I can close the window. So now let's go open up a purchasing batch. I'm going to click Purchasing, click Batches, and I can see that there's a ribbon now on this window. So let's create a batch, Test, Payables, Transaction Entry, click Transactions, select a vendor, click Save, bring this back up, and we can see that it has not been submitted, so we can click Submit, or if we needed to, we can print the edit report. In this case, we're just going to click Submit. And now let's log in as Phyllis. Now that we're logged in as Phyllis, let's go under the purchasing series. Here, there's multiple ways of approving these batches as well. If I go to the payables batch pending approval list, I can approve multiple batches. If there were in this list, I only have one for this example. I can approve, reject, delegate if I want. Let's go under in the batch, we can approve through there. So select that, and we can go to workflow, approve, approve, and now we have approved a payables batch. The vendor approval workflow will require that the vendor be approved via processing through the workflow before any transactions via the payment transaction entry window for this vendor can be posted. In addition, it is not possible to create new computer check payments or post any manual payments for the vendor until it has been submitted. The vendor can be created and edited. Some transactions can be added for this vendor, and the edit list for those allowed transactions can be printed. Creating payments for this vendor will be limited prior to approval. When a vendor has been submitted to the approval workflow process, that vendor record will be placed on hold. This will prevent some processing, namely payments, and in other cases cause alerts. For example, a message will appear when the user creates a purchase order for this vendor. A vendor is on hold. Do you want to continue entering the purchase order? The workflow history and actions for the batch are available in the vendor maintenance window, the vendor list, and for specific tasks in the vendor pending approval and vendor not submitted list. Let's take a look at this feature in action. Here I'm logged in to Dynamics GP 2015, and let's go to the administration, company, workflow, workflow maintenance, vendor approval. We'll select a manager, click OK, click Save. We're going to create a new workflow. Vendor approval is going to be the name of my workflow, but you can enter in what makes sense to you. Select the options that you want for your workflow. Click Save, New Step, you can have it to be required for this step always, or you can do another condition, and I'm going to just leave it as always. I'm going to select my user that I want to have it approved by. Click Save, Activate, and Save. Now we can go to the vendor card, so purchasing. I'm going to expand cards, vendor, and I see that the vendor workflow is turned on in the vendor maintenance. For this example, I'm just going to create a new vendor and call it test. I'm going to click save, go back into there, and I'm going to click submit. Submit. So now when I want to go enter in a purchase order, so it's going to be under the transactions, purchase order entry, If I try to create a purchase order with this vendor test, it's going to give me a warning message. The vendor test is on hold. Do you want to continue entering the purchase order? At this point, I can click yes or no. If I click yes, it will let me go on, but the vendor is still going to be on hold. So if we drill back and take a look at the vendor, I can see that it's on hold pending approval. So I won't be able to print the purchase order, but I'll be able to enter in the information and save it. Another example would be to enter in the transaction entry for purchasing. So from here, I can enter in a transaction for this vendor. However, if I try to post this transaction, it's going to give me a message saying that it must complete the workflow first. If I try to print a check from this window, it says that I must complete a workflow. So at this point, what I can do is I can either delete this transaction or save it to a batch. So now let's log in as Phyllis and approve that vendor workflow. So under the purchasing series, vendor, we're going to select that vendor and it's on hold. We're going to go and approve. And now when we go back and look at the vendor, we'll see that it's not on hold. We can also view the history and we can see that when it started and when it was approved and who approved it. The receivables batch approval workflow requires that the batch be approved via processing through the workflow before it can be posted. The batch can be entered, the transactions can be added, and the edit list can be printed, but posting of the batch will not be allowed prior to approval. The workflow actions for the batch are available in the Receivables Batch Entry window, the Receivables Batch List, and for specific tasks in the Receivables Batch Pending Approval and Receivables Batch Not Submitted list. The workflow history can be accessed from the Receivables Transaction Inquiry Zoom and Cash Receipts Inquiry Zoom, as well as the windows mentioned before. Let's take a look at this feature in action. In GP 2015, let's go turn on workflow for receivables. So under the administration, and we're going to look at company, workflow, workflow maintenance. Under the sales series, the receivables batch approval, I'm going to select a manager. In this case, I'm just going to use my administrator user. I'm going to create a new workflow. Click yes to save. So receivables batch. Select the options that are appropriate for your workflow. This is just going to be a simple example. And click Save. Now I'm going to click New Step. I'm going to have it always require, but if I wanted to, I could do a condition, and with the condition, there is a predefined list as well in here. So if the batch was a certain amount or a certain ID, we can have that as a condition, but I'm just going to have it always. And as for the assignment, you can do people and groups, hierarchy, workflow role. In this case, I'm just going to select a user. I'm going to select send message, click save. Now I'm going to go activate the workflow, click save, and close this. Now under my sales series, under transactions, I can go into the batches. From here, I can create a batch. I can see that workflow is enabled. It also works with the cash receipts and transaction entry. I'm going to click transactions, create a transaction, select a user for my example, and I can save at this point, save it to a batch. If I go back and look at the batch, from here at this point, if I wanted to, I can submit it. I can print it and look at the edit list, but at this point I'm just going to hit submit. And if I reopen up the batch here, I can see that it's pending approval by Phyllis. So let's go log in as Phyllis. So now that we're logged in as Phyllis, we can go take a look at the batch. There is a predefined list now, so we can look pending approval if we wanted to. There's also the lists that are not submitted, but in this case, we're just going to go take a look at that batch. So the receivables batch, select test, my transaction entry. I can see it's pending approval, and I can approve in here. Also, if I have it turned on, I can approve through my email. I have that option enabled, or I could use the list to approve. So now if we go back as the other user, we can take a look at that batch and see that it's been approved. I would be able to see it as Phyllis as well, but I wanted to log back in as the other user just to show. So it says that it's completed. The expense report approval is now available in Workflow 2.0. Project accounting employees can create expense reports for any projects to which they are assigned. Employees can also be set up to allow delegates to enter their expense reports on their behalf. Workflow approvals and task assignments are defined for expense reports. Workflow actions are executed on the documents from the expense entry window or from the navigation list. Let's take a look at this feature in action. So this is GP 2015, and let's go to administration, and then company, workflow, workflow maintenance. From the drop-down, select project, expense report approval, select a manager. In my case, I'm selecting administrator. Click save, new workflow, and then I'm going to write a description. Select the options that are appropriate for your workflow. Click save, new step, and then in this case I'm just going to have it always required, but depends on your workflow, you can change the settings. So I'm going to grab my Phyllis user, click add, OK, send a message. So this is just an example of what I have set up in my test environment. And then now I'm going to activate and save. Close this window and then open up the expense window for project. Select project, expand out under transactions, time and expense, employee expense entry, and from here I can enter in an expense. So I'm going to do a quantity of 1. And now I can submit the workflow. So now we're going to log in as Phyllis. So I'm logged in as Phyllis. I'm going under project. And one of the ways that I can approve is going under the list. So PTE expenses pending approvals. From here I can select my transaction and I can click approve, approve, and I can see one succeeded. Employee skill approval workflow. Employees maintain their education and test in the employee skills and trainings window and view their skills and training history. Workflow functionality is integrated so employees can submit changes and managers can approve changes from the navigation list or from an email notification. To turn on the employee skills approval, you go to Administration, under Company, Workflow, Workflow maintenance. Select the series of payroll. Employee skills approval. Select the manager. In this case, I'm selecting administrator. Select OK. Click Save. New workflow. Create a workflow name. Employee skill. Select your options. Click Save. New step. Create a step name. In this case, I'm just typing in employee skill. And I'm going to have the condition have it always require this step, but I could select conditions met, select the blue arrow, and see that there is a number of different fields that I can select. I'm going to go back and always require this step. You can assign it to a specific person, group, hierarchy, or role. In this case, I'm just going to select it to hierarchy, and I'm going to do my direct manager. Click OK, and then send notification message. This is going to select based on your Active Directory, so the direct manager is going to look at your Active Directory. Click Save. I'm going to go and activate, save, close my window, and now under the HR and payroll, under cards, self-service, and skills and training, I can see that it's enabled. The employee profile approval workflow. The new employee profile window in Microsoft Dynamics GP 2015 allows employees to view and/or update their personal information, including address, phone numbers, emergency contacts, dependents, and position history. Workflow functionality is integrated so employees can submit changes, and managers can approve the changes from a navigation list or from an email notification. So from here I can add my education. So let's say I went to NDSU for my MIS degree, and I graduated in 2010. Tab off the line, I can click Submit. Click Submit. And when I go back into that window, I can see that it's pending approval by my manager, Anne. To enable the employee workflow approval, under Administration, Company, Workflow, Workflow Maintenance, the Payroll Series, Employee Profile, select your manager, click OK, click Save, New Workflow, enter a workflow name, select your options, click OK, click Save, New Step, create your conditions, click Assign To. In this case, I'm going to select my manager, direct manager, click Send Message, click Save, enable the workflow, and then click Save again. Now I can go under the Payroll Series, Cards, and then Self-Service, Employee Profile, and I see that the workflow is enabled. So from here I can make my change. Once I make a change in there and tab off, the Submit button will enable. I click Submit, and I can go back and take a look at the profile, and now it's pending approval and the Employee Direct Deposit window allows employees to view and edit their direct deposit information. They can start or stop direct deposit, add or remove accounts, and edit direct deposit distribution. With workflow for employee direct deposit, the direct deposit changes can be routed to the appropriate people for verification before updating the employee's data. The workflow status appears on the window, and the actions can be taken directly from those windows, from an email, or a navigation list. In GP 2015, to enable the direct deposit workflow, go under the Administration, Company, Workflow, Workflow Maintenance, Payroll Series, Direct Deposit, select your manager, click Save, click New Workflow, create a workflow name, select your options, click Save, New Step, create a step, select the conditions, assign a person, a group, a hierarchy. In this case, I'm going to do my direct manager, and select the options that you want. Click Save, activate the workflow. And now when you go under the HR and Payroll and select my direct deposit, I can see workflow is enabled, and from here I can make a change and submit the workflow. Click Submit, and go back into my window. I can see it's a pending approval by manager. One thing to note, I have predefined that this employee is associated with my user under the employee maintenance screen. W4 approval workflow. A new employee self-service feature in Microsoft Dynamics GP 2015 lets a user view and update their own W4 information. With Employee W4, the user can see their current W4 settings, view historical W4s, make changes, and submit changes to workflow. In the Employee Withholding Certificate window, the employee can manage their information, and once submitted to workflow, the change will be routed automatically prior to updating the employee's record. To enable the W4 workflow, under the Administration, Company, Workflow, Workflow Maintenance, Payroll Series, the W4 approval, select your manager, click Save, New Workflow, title your workflow, select your options, click Save, New Step, name your step, select your conditions. In this case, I'm just going to leave it to always, but depending on your requirements, you may need to use the conditions. Assign to, in this case, I'm going to do my direct manager, and send message, click Save, Workflow, activate, and save workflow. Now under the HR and Payroll series, under Cards, Self-Service, and then W4 Withholding. From here, I can see that workflow is enabled. I can make a change to my workflow, put my digital signature in here, tab off the line, and now I can submit my workflow. I can see my history information in here for the history that was done from this window. And I can also go back and look and see that it's pending approval by my manager, Anne.